There's one dot underneath it. There's the vowel. So whenever you have one dot over a letter, then you know it's going to be E. Now, under a letter. Did I say over? The letter's over the vowel. The vowel's under the letter. Sometimes I get my prepositions mixed up with my adverbly. Yeah. Anyway, the other one that makes the E, okay, has a yod right there. Okay? So you remember how sometimes those vowels, they have the vowel mark or point as they're known, and then they have like a letter, but the next letter is part of the vowel. Okay? And that happens with this vowel. Sometimes you're not going to have a yod there. Sometimes you're going to have a yod there. Sometimes you're going to miss it and you're going to pronounce the yod. But even if you pronounce the yod, if you listen, E, okay? It's almost identical. Nobody is going to know. Okay? So that's all you need to remember about the E vowels. So next week we'll do the O vowels, and then we'll do the U vowels with the Shva, which is its own vowel. And then you'll have all of the vowels, at least you'll have gone over them, and you have this handy-dandy chart there if you want to go back and look. Now, this is what I did, okay, years ago, is I make these little cards, and like that one there, well, I'll just pass them out. You can just look at them, and they're not in any order, so you're not going to mess up the order. But I did that so I could remember the vowels, and then remember the names of the vowels. And then what happens is, or what happened to me is, then I begin reading and get better at it, and then I don't remember the names of the vowels anymore. Is that you don't really need the names of the vowels. What you need to know is that goes E, so you can read it. All right? Any questions about those vowels? Old-fashioned, that's right. It's the only ones I know how to make. And they have all these ones you can download these things online, and I'm like, just make them. Because when you make it, it emblazons it in your memory. Okay, just like writing over and over again. That's why reading Hebrew, the more you write Hebrew, the more you'll be able to read Hebrew. Even if you're not all the way aware of what you're writing or what it means, if you just learn how to make the letters and then learn how to recognize the letters, then reading will happen, right? You read Hebrew, right? Yeah. So, and anybody that says, oh, Hebrew is a really, really hard language is wrong. It is not, okay? It's one of the easiest languages that you can learn. And there's a couple different reasons. One is that most of the letters don't look like anything that you already know. So you don't get them mixed up with English, like other languages that use the letters that we use, but everything's different. That doesn't happen. So that's one. The other one is there's a small number of words. Compared to English and other languages, the number of words that there are is small, okay? And the other one is there are not many exceptions to the rules, okay? In English, they're everywhere, So English really is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. So, and they're learning it all over the world. When we go, or when the group goes down to Guatemala, they're going to find that most of the children there speak English already, because they're learning English in school. So, anyway, and they're learning English in India and just all over the world. People are learning English. So, maybe people will begin learning Hebrew all over the world. Okay, let's look at the notes and look at the reading. And I don't know about you, but this is one of those readings where I want to ask, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? All the way down the line, and I want to know, what does it mean? What does it mean today? What am I going to do about that? And a lot of people want to know that about all the rules, because everybody goes into all the rules and they get all worried about Torah being a bunch of laws. Okay, and one of the reasons for that is the poor, bad translation of the word Torah into the word law. Okay, and when you've heard that all of your life over and over again for literally thousands of years, we've heard that. The law, the law, the law, the law, the law. Then to instantly have your brain go, oh, the law is good. Even though in Romans, Paul writes, the law is good. Except he wrote Torah, I believe, not the law, or whatever it is in Greek, which I don't remember right now. But anyway, that's the idea. So as we are reading this, and as we have any of the commandments that we read, you might look at it and you might go, oh, I didn't know that. Or you might look at it and go, well, I can't do that. Okay, great. If you can't do it, don't do it. Okay, but then you'll get to ones and you'll go, oh, that one I'm already doing. Well, yeah, you are, because you're learning God's way of living life. And these instructions, there's little bits for everybody. There are instructions for men, instructions for women, instructions for everyone, instructions for only the Kohanim, the priests, instructions for different classes of Kohanim, instructions for mothers, instructions for husbands and wives, and on and on and on. So if you're reading an instruction and instructions for a husband and you're a wife, guess what? You don't got to do that one, all right, unless it's an overall general one, like Paul, when he wrote in Ephesians, submit to one another out of love for Messiah. Okay, so that means when people come to me and they gripe about the fact that their wife is not submitting, men usually, then I'll ask the man, well, in what ways are you submitting to your wife? What do you mean? I don't need to submit to my wife. I said, well, did you read the verse before the verse that you're reading? Well, no, because it's in a different heading in your Bibles, right? That's what happens. So the headings can mess us up. But anyway, none of that is in the notes, but that's where my mind went. Okay. In this reading, we are following up now with Israel at the bottom of the mountain. By the way, a couple of our own members will pee on the bottom of that mountain in a couple weeks. And I think they're leaving in about 1 week. Robert and Art are going over to that mountain, and they're going to be there maybe with Miles Jones and maybe some others. Miles Jones wrote some of those books that we've held up here from time to time. So I'm dealing with jealousy, prayers. Father, remove it in the name of Yeshua. Jealousy, get out of me. Anyway, so they're at the bottom of the mountain, and Moses is going to go back up, and he's going to be there a while. How many days? 40 days, 40 nights. Where have you heard that? Well, Noah, okay, and Yeshua, yes. Okay, so there's one of those dots in the Bible that our brains are meant to make a connection. We're going to learn another one in a little bit that Mark is going to bring up, and you better all go, wow, because it's a wow dot connector, okay? Anyway, Moses is going back up the mountain, and now Yehovah is going to give him what is known as the Book of the Covenant. Okay? So we have the words, 10 words. Those are like the index. Okay? Those are like the headings. Now we're going to get into the book that has the words worked out in real life, okay? But we must remember it's in the life and the world and the culture of ancient Middle East Israel. Okay? It's not in our world, and our we don't live in that world. So that means there are going to be instructions in this book of the law, of the Torah, of the covenant, that we're going to need to translate into our day. What does that mean in our day? You know, if your ox mauls, or what's the word? Gores your neighbor, and your neighbor dies, then your ox is got to die. Okay, and if you knew that your ox was mean and you'd already dealt with it, and then it goes and stomps on your neighbor and your neighbor dies, guess what? You might die. Okay? Now, what in the world does that have to do with you? How many of you own an ox? Okay? You may have other animals, chickens or whatever, goats, all right, but not an ox. So here's the way I look at that. If I leave my Forerunner in my driveway and I leave it in N, and I don't put the brake on, and I go in my house and somebody's walking by and it rolls down my driveway because I didn't do what I needed to do, and it's, injures them, guess what? That's my ox. Okay, so, things like that, little things like that, and you're like, well, they're already in the Bible, but they don't look like they do in modern day, but you have to go back, and you have to ask the Holy Spirit, what does that mean for me? Okay, so we're going to look at that. Now, these words in the Book of the Covenant are also known as the Ketubah, which is the wedding promises and vows that are to be made. And that's why I have on your notes the connections with the Hebrew wedding and what we're reading in Torah. So you have Yehovah as the groom, you have Israel as the bride, you have Moses as the best man and the matchmaker, you have a great deliverance when they were brought out of Egypt. You have a cleansing ceremony. The bride always went through a mikvah, okay, the waters of baptism and cleansing. Well, that's when Israel went through, thus he. You have a hoopah, which is the canopy that goes over you at a wedding. That's the cloud covering the mountain. You have the document, the ketubah. That's the 10 words and the book of the covenant. And then you have vows. You have Yehovah saying, I will do this. And then you have Israel saying, we will do this. Then you have the ring, which is a symbol of marriage. What is that? Shabbat. It's the sign that we are in covenant with Yehovah. So whenever you ask somebody about going somewhere, or doing something, or you have a little job and you want it done on Saturday morning, and they go, or you go, no, I'm not going to do that. That's Shabbat. All you're doing is holding up your wedding ring, saying, nope, I got something else going on in that day. I have an arrangement with my husband, okay? You have a new house that's going to be built, which is the tabernacle. You have a bedroom or an inner chamber, which is going to be the Holy of Holies. And then you have a dwelling place, which will be the land, promised land. So all of that is going on in Shemot, in Exodus. So what a beautiful book. Okay, it begins 21:1. These are the MISHPATIM you are to present to them. Okay, rulings is a good word. Ordinances is a good word. I like directions because it's all about walking the road. And in order to walk the road, you need directions on how to walk. Okay? Now, this book of the covenant will have instructions about business relationships, okay, employers and employees. It'll have information about criminal courts of law. It'll have information about restitution and compensation. It'll have instructions about personal responsibility and family relationships, okay, including you-know-what, religion and worship, treatment of strangers and foreigners and widows and orphans and the poor, and instructions regarding that on borrowing and lending. So that's a lot right there. That's a lot of lessons to learn in life. Okay? So now what I want to do is we're going to look at kind of like an outline of these lessons and look at connections that are going to be made all throughout the Bible and in Yeshua and in the writings of the New Testament in there as well. Okay? All right, now, this is where, by the way, 21 verse 2 loses a lot of people that have any interest at all in Torah. And they might be listening and they might go, yeah, all right, I'll read it. And so you sit down and maybe you're going to help them and you're going to read it, and then you get to this verse and they're like, wait. I knew that the Bible was bad and old and that God was not good. This God of the Old Testament. Why? Because it begins, if you purchase a Hebrew slave. So they're like, slavery is all right in the Bible. Right? But what they don't realize, because they didn't bother to look it up, is slavery in the Bible is not like at least slavery among the Israelites is not like slavery in Egypt. Okay? It's a different idea altogether. And it's definitely not like the evil slave trade that began happening about the 1600s, 1500s, something like that in Africa. And there were many nations that were involved, okay? Including England and the U.S. and France and almost every African nation. And Arabia, the Arabs had one of the biggest slave markets in the world. Okay, so it wasn't only us, but it was a worldwide evil that was going on. This is not that. What you're reading about in the Bible is not that, okay? Listen, if you purchase a Hebrew slave, he is to work how many years? 6 years. But in the 7th, he is to be given his freedom without having to pay anything, okay? Now, think about that, okay? I'm going to give you a job, and you're going to work for me, and you get every Shabbat off, right? Because you're in Israel now, and Israel had to do Shabbat in order that everybody and everything in their house might rest. Slaves, free, animal, women, whatever, okay? You're going to get it off, and you only have to work for me 6 years. And then you're going to get whatever we agreed on that you were going to get for working for me for that many years. Okay? Where else have we already read in Torah about a guy that worked for another guy in order to get what he wanted, and he worked that many years, and then he worked another that many years? Jacob. So Jacob was a slave to his uncle. Okay? What was he really? He was his employee. And there are a lot of employees that are treated worse than slaves in Israel in that day. I mean, today. Okay? So don't get that idea. Now, if he came in single, he is to leave single. If he was married when he came, then his wife is to go with him when he leaves. But if his master gave him a wife, and she bore him sons or daughters, then the wife and her children will belong to her master, and he will leave by himself. Okay? What if he doesn't want to leave his wife and children? Well, you don't have to leave. You can leave if you want, but you don't have to leave, okay? The word slave is the word ebed, okay? And it can mean slave, servant, or attendant, or about 20 other things. It has a lot of other meanings, okay? A couple of the notes down here out of the complete Jewish study Bible. It says the word Eved refers more accurately to an indentured servant or worker. Okay? Prager writes this: there were 3 types of people who could become Hebrew slaves: paupers, debtors, and thieves. A pauper, that's a poor man who could not make a living, worked for another person in exchange for room and board. Well, by the way, we weren't using a whole lot of money yet. Okay? A debtor who was unable to pay his debts worked without salary until he worked off his debts. And a thief who was unable to make restitution would have to work off his theft. Okay? So the slave or employee was to be given a 7-year contract, and at the beginning of the 7th year, he was released in order to either go pursue something else, or he could re-contract with his employer or his master for the rest of his life. Okay? So for us, what I get out of that is that we need to treat people who work with us or for us fairly. Give them a decent wage, allow them to have off, treat them right. That's what this command is all about. But there's another meaning. If we want to go into another level of meaning with this, which we know Jewish, theologians are really good at doing that. Excuse me. Okay, think about this. Israel had been in Egypt for many years. And what they knew in Egypt were the Egyptian gods. These gods were angry and controlling and manipulative and offered no relationship with individuals or communities at all. Okay? Yehovah is not like that. So he gives them a living illustration because Yehovah had redeemed, right? Remember the language in Exodus 6, I will redeem you. That means buy you. I will buy you and you will be mine. So the idea is that Israel, B'nai Yisrael, are no longer ebed, slaves in Egypt to Pharaoh, the evil king. Now they are slaves, or they work for Yehovah. But Yehovah is not like the other masters, right? Okay, in the seventh year, they go free, and they don't have to buy it because it's already been bought. All right, the idea that they're given, that the slave is given his freedom, is the word yatzah, which is which is a root word that means go out, come out, leave at will. Okay? And Yatzah is written 7 times in this section alone. Where else it is used and is connected is life being brought forth, as we read about in Genesis 1, that the earth brought forth grass. Yatzah, grass. Okay? In addition, you have the number 7, which is very symbolic, we already know, in Torah and in all the Bible. Okay, now, what happens if, nevertheless, if this is verse 5, if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, so I don't want to go free. Then his master is to bring him before God, and there at the door of the doorpost, his master is to pierce his ear with an awl, and the man will be slave for life. Okay, how many of you have a hole in your ears? Do any of y'all have a hole in your ears? Guys? None of you guys do? Back when I was in my 20s, it was, the guys were all doing it and everything. And, hello. And my wife was like, well, hon, are you going to get one of those? And I said, no, I've been by where they do it, and I've watched them do it, and there's no way. If I don't have to do that, why would I do that? You know, that looks, and my daughter did it, how old was she? I don't know, 9, something like that. They're in the mall, she's in the mall, and she gets in there, and she goes, boom, and they do that, and I just about pass out watching it. But anyway, so it wasn't something that was bad, something that was horrible. Apparently there's not a lot of nerves in your lobe there, and apparently in the day it was normal for men or women to have their ears pierced. That wasn't a big deal. But what's amazing about this is, where does this happen? The door of the house, okay, as an expression that this individual who said basically, I don't want to go out from your house. That's what it means to be free. I don't want to go out from your house. And then the owner of the house goes, all right, then you're going to be mine for life. That's what God does. That's what this is, the deeper meaning of this, and how symbolic this is. Okay, now, something else that I put there in the notes only because I thought it was interesting. You know there are things that I write in there that I think are interesting, but that doesn't mean they mean anything deep. Doesn't mean that I even agree with what I've written down. Okay, sometimes I write things down because I want you to know what others believe about this, okay? Is that word that his master will bring him before God is the word Elohim. And in a lot of Bibles, even in the Jewish, the main Bible used in Judaism, the JPS, it says he will bring him before the judges, meaning the members of Israel that are the rulers. All right? So the word Elohim is used in the Bible not only to mean God, the God, it's also used to mean other gods, and it's also used to mean leaders. Very interesting, huh? Okay, because the word El simply means mighty one. So a mighty one can be the mighty one, it can be another God mighty one, or it can be a man who's a mighty one. Okay, just wanted to be aware of that. Okay, now something else very interesting is that in Babylonian law, there was a Babylonian law book that originated around the time of Torah. Okay, and maybe you've heard of it. Hammurabi's Code is the name of it. But look at how different it is. Okay, this is one of the things to realize about Torah. Is one of the things that makes it unique is it differentiates Israel and their, if you want to use the word religion, their faith, their walk in life from every other nation in the world. Because all the other nations, they have some laws, but they don't look like these. Okay, so here's Hammurabi's. If a male slave said to his master, "You are not my master," his master shall prove him to be his slave and cut off his ear. So you have it like opposite. In Hammurabi's, it's like if a slave wants to run away and leave the master can grab him and slice his ear off. Okay? In Torah, it's the opposite. If a man wants to remain with his master because he's already been released for nothing, all right, then he gets a little hole in his ear. Okay? So, that's amazing. All right? Yehovah purchased a Hebrew slave who is now Yehovah's slave through Shabbat, or the principle of Shabbat. Yehovah releases his slave in order that she can be truly free to experience a life of rest and not bondage. Okay? And remember, the key words in this are that the slave says, "I love my master." This is a choice based on love. And then the master brings him to the door of the house and marks him forever as mine. Okay? This man belongs to me. This house is now his house, and this proves that Yehovah wants us serving him out of love and not out of fear. It's about relationship. Okay? So, do you like that one? All right, let's do another one. Compensation. Verse 23. Oh, yeah, this is the one. But if any harm follows, then you are to give life for life. By the way, you have to read this with the right tone of voice. life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise. Now, how many of you ever in your life read that and went, oh, that's awful? It sounds horrendous. Wow, that's just awful. And the reason is because we're not reading it right. Because we didn't know what it was really about. Okay? What it's about is compensation. Normally in economic matters. Okay? The Hebrew idiom, it's an idiom, life or life. Nefesh, tahat, nefesh, was always interpreted to mean that the financial burden caused by an attacker is fully his responsibility. In other words, he's going to be responsible for medical recovery, wages lost, projected wages lost, and any suffering endured. Okay? This teaching, by the way, in Torah is given in legal terms, and it's to help courts to know what to do in certain situations, and it's a way to limit vengeance. Really, get rid of vengeance. That's the goal. In Leviticus, what you have written in Torah, in Leviticus 18, is do not bear a grudge or take vengeance on your brother or your neighbor. Okay? It's where we get the words, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? Now, the idea that there's a limit on the compensation is like this. If your neighbor breaks your window, you do not have the right to burn his house to the ground. Okay? If your neighbor breaks your window, he owes you a window. He doesn't owe you anything else unless he was using a ball and the ball broke the window and then the ball hit somebody in the house and then that individual had to go to the hospital. Now your neighbor owes you a window and your hospital bill. Right? Okay? That's all that means. That's how that works. I don't think there's anybody on earth that thinks that's a bad idea. That's what the court system is supposed to be about. Now, you have other religions and other cultures in the world, like the Babylonian one that we mentioned, where if you're, let's see, what was one that I read, and I read it right out of Hammurabi's code. It was if you do something like if a man looks at your wife the wrong way, you get to remove his right hand. Okay, something like that. It's like, whoa, okay? It's not like that in God's realm. In the realm of Israel, it's not going to be like that. Now, fast forward to the gospel and the Sermon on the Mount and Yeshua, okay? Saying this, and by the way, you guys, if you read this Sermon on the Mount out of the New Testament and you've never read the Old, and all you do is read it from an English Bible, it's going to be very confusing. Because these are his words, okay? You have heard that our fathers were told, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you not to stand up against someone who does you wrong. On the contrary, if someone hits you on the right cheek, let him hit you on the left cheek too. Now, if I already know Torah, I'm going to ask, what does that have to do with the eye for an eye? Tooth? What does that have to do with what I read in Torah? Sounds like Yeshua is talking about relationships, just me and another guy, or something like that. which is exactly right. He is talking about relationships like that. And the reason that he's using those words is because in his day, the rabbis, the leaders, the religious leaders were misinterpreting the law as a license to take vengeance. Okay? So in reality, what Yeshua was doing was correcting their view and interpretation of the Torah idiom, eye for an eye. And when he taught his disciples, turn the other cheek, he was teaching them how to forgive. He wasn't teaching them something about legal matters. Okay? So in other words, it does not mean if your neighbor breaks your window with a rock, you ought to just forget about it. Give him the rock back and say, hit the other window. That's not what it's about. Okay? If your neighbor breaks your window with a rock, you have the right to get your window reimbursed or whatever, but you must forgive your neighbor from your heart. Okay? You can do both. You can have justice and forgiveness, right? Okay? You guys all right? Okay, stealing. If someone steals an ox or a sheep or slaughters it and sells it, he is to pay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Wow. Okay, and then it goes on with the other animals. And then if a thief is caught in the act of breaking in and he is beaten to death, it is not murder. Yeah, even Sound Booth is laughing at that one. Okay, now get that. This is Torah. This is God's instruction. Somebody breaks into your house and you beat them to death, it's not murder. Unless it's light. Okay, if it's daylight out, then everything's different now. Okay, then it is murder. And notice that the thief must make restitution. Okay. So if he has nothing, then he is going to be a slave to the one that he ripped off. Okay, which is what Reger was writing about earlier. Okay, if what he stole is found alive in his possession, he's to pay double. Why? Because that'll learn him. That'll teach him. All right, no matter whether it's an ox, a donkey, or a sheep. If a person causes a field or a vineyard to be grazed over and lets his animal loose to graze in someone else's field, he is to make restitution from the best produce of his own field and vineyard. Okay? So basically what it means, if you steal in any way, you owe the individual that you stole from, and you owe him more. Okay, why? Why would you owe him more? Because it's one of the main words. Thou shalt not steal. Okay? So it's going to have more of a weight on the penalty in order so that everybody learns that God means what his words mean. And what's that word? When you don't want something to happen again, it acts as a consequence. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Deterrent to whatever happening again. That's the idea. God is brilliant. Okay, now, we find this Torah teaching acted out in the in the story of Zacchaeus and Yeshua. Remember? Zacchaeus, the wee little man, climbed up the tree. Yeshua said, I'm going to eat at your house. But what was his job? What was Zacchaeus' job? tax collector, okay? And in that day, they were notorious for being a little bit crooked, okay? And that means that likely Zacchaeus took more than the amount that was allowed in order for him to get more rich, and apparently he was. And Yeshua went to his house, and after meeting him and sitting down with him, Zacchaeus, we read in Luke the 19th chapter, stood there and said to the Lord, "Here, Lord, I am giving half of all I own to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I will pay him back 4 times as much." He's not only obeying Torah, he's going beyond. Okay? And then Yeshua said to him, "Today, salvation has come to this house, inasmuch as this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save what was lost." How was Zacchaeus lost? Because he was an Israelite that wasn't walking in the ways of Yehovah. Okay, that made him a lost sheep. And we know that Yeshua's mission was to go find, gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This was one of them. You can read the comments that I wrote there from David Stern. But what I want you to realize is that Zacchaeus' willingness to obey what he already knew was God's instruction was the way that Yeshua knew salvation came to the house. Jesus wasn't just meaning I am in the house. Me, Yeshua, because his name means salvation. But there was a connection there where Yeshua was like, yep, I need to walk in his ways. Isn't that neat? You guys are very quiet and mild tonight. Oh, you're listening. Okay. Now we have the treatment of foreigners, widows, and orphans. Okay, in 22. You must neither wrong nor oppress a foreigner living among you, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. In other words, don't treat others the way the Egyptians treated you. And by the way, that means even an Egyptian. Okay? That's the amazing love and grace and mercy of our Father, that He would not want us treating others the way that we have been treated, but the way we want them to treat us. Isn't there something else in the Bible about that? Okay, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, not do unto others before they do unto you. Right? Or not do unto others as they have done unto you. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. Okay? Same thing going on here. Now, the word ger in the Bible was usually a non-Israelite who wanted to be an Israelite. Okay, so these are like the members of the mixed multitude that came with them out of Egypt, or visitors that they might have from other nations and things like that. This doesn't mean the wicked Goliath. Okay, it doesn't mean you're supposed to be nice to Goliath. All right, it means those that want to be among you. Okay. And those who were not idol worshipers. Okay? Verse 21, you are not to abuse any widow or orphan If you do abuse them in any way, and they cry to me, I will certainly heed their cry, and my anger will burn, and I will kill you with the sword. Your own wives will be widows, and your own children fatherless. So there. Don't mess with the widows and orphans, other than loving them and helping them. Exact same thing we read in the book of James, right? About true religion, where he writes, the religious observance that God the Father considers pure and faultless is this: care for the orphans and widows in their distress, and keep oneself from being contaminated by the world. Did you ever wonder what those have to do with one another? Caring for widows and orphans and keeping oneself from being polluted by the world? What is that? I mean, how do those fit together? How do those ideas go together? Yes, the world in the way that he's writing about it here means those that only look out for number one. Okay? Those who are only looking out for them, which you'll learn, we'll look at a little bit more Friday night, because that's where we have James and John and Mommy coming up to Yeshua and going, hey, by the way, when you get to sit down on your throne in your kingdom, can we be at your right hand and your left hand? Right? Jesus, can we be your guys? And you know what? Even our mom thinks it's a good idea, don't you, Mom? That really is a hilarious thing. It's hilarious and makes you want to weep all at once. It's hilarious that their mom was there. So anyway, we'll talk about that Shevat night, Friday night. Okay, moving on. You are not to delay offering from your harvest of grain, olive oil, or wine. The firstborn of your sons you are to give to me. Okay? So that's all about first fruits of your harvest or your yield or that which you have brought forth. Okay? And not only does your grain and your olive oil and your wine belong to him, but your firstborn. Now, this is not a call to bring your firstborn in that they might be offered in the fire. Okay? Remember when we read about this redemption of the firstborn and that it was going to be an amount of money? And the amount of money ended up, in today's money, ends up being about $40. So you would bring your $40, bring it into the priest, hand it over, and you're good to go. You have redeemed your firstborn. And the priest would then be able to use that money for whatever was needed in ministry to others or in the temple if it needed to be fixed up or whatever. Okay? So next we have treatment of enemies, personal enemies, not like the Canaanites, but just your neighbor, Joe. Okay? If you see the donkey which belongs to someone who hates you, lying down helpless under its load, you are not to pass him by, but to go and help him free it. Okay? Yeshua drew on this idea when he said to the religious leaders or to his disciples, you've heard that our fathers were told, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies, praying for those who persecute you. So that little statement, hate your enemy, where is that in Torah? Where is that in the Bible? It's not, except right here. Okay? That's what the religious leaders had added. That was the tradition that they had added. So when Yeshua says, you have heard, love your neighbor, that's right. And hate your enemy, that's wrong. Okay? In Torah, you even help the man who's your neighbor or whatever that hates you, in other words, your enemy, and you have to help him. Okay? That's loving your enemies. It's helping your neighbor, even your neighbor that you don't like. And did you know in a congregation of more than 3 people, okay, if you have a church or a congregation or a messianic community or whatever, and you have more than 3 people, and sometimes even less than that, you're going to have people that you don't like. Mark has a bone to pick with Dana. What kind of bone? I like bones if it has meat on it and you can eat it. Okay. Anyway, that's, you know what I'm getting at. Okay? Yes, Yeshua even adds pray for them, which is not always easy. I've got something on my leg, and I'm going to remove it. It's a something to help me because my leg's bothering me. So give me a second. Because it's cutting off my blood flow.
Your ankle bracelet's too tight?
No, my knee bracelet. So we're going to take it off. Woo! See how that works. This is a device for anybody who has runner's knee. If you ever get runner's knee, you can stick this right under your knee, on your leg, and it's supposed to help, and it really does. So I'm dealing with a little bit of runner's knee right now, but it'll get well. All right. Next, we have Sabbath, okay, where he lays it out again, because he already laid it out in the words, right? 6 days you are to work, but on the 7th day you are to rest, so that your ox and your donkey can rest, and your slave girl's son and the foreigner can be renewed. So basically, everybody that you can think of that even in your mind, well, maybe they don't deserve rest, no. Okay? It's rest. Why? Why does he want you to rest? In this verse, what is the reason to rest? So that you may be renewed. In other words, I love you. I'm going to be your husband. As your husband, I want you to be renewed. I want you to be vital. I want you to be alive. And I know how you're made because I made you. Okay? And you're not made to work 7 days a week. 7 days a week. You are not built to do that. You keep doing that, and it's not going to be good. Right? We all know that. Okay? Now, Yeshua said it like this. Shabbat was made for mankind, not mankind for Shabbat. The Son of Man is Lord even of Shabbat. Now, that's in Mark. And we went over that in Matthew, and you'll remember that one of the twists that I gave you on that was that, and this is not easy in the Gospels. You don't know when Son of Man means any man, or it means the Son of Man, capital S, capital M, like from the book of Daniel. Okay? You don't know. You got to figure it out. When God looks at Ezekiel and goes, Son of Man, he doesn't mean that Ezekiel is the Messiah. Okay? Same thing goes on in the Gospels and in Matthew. So, if this is not the capital S, capital M, Son of Man, then what he means is Shabbat will be whatever you do with it. Okay? I'm handing it over to you. I made it for you, and now I'm handing it over to you. I'm not going to make you do it. Okay? If you do it, you're going to be blessed. If you don't do it, it's not going to be good. But I'm not going to make you do it. Okay? All right. Oh, yeah, interesting that there is a, typographical error. There's an O where there shouldn't be one. There is a passage in the Talmud that says it like this: for it, meaning Shabbat, is holy unto you. That is, it is committed into your hands, not you into its hands. It is committed into your hands. You have the ability to keep it, as Yeshua did. Didn't he keep Shabbat? Yeah. Okay? He went into the synagogue on Shabbat and read, as you read about in Luke. Okay, there are other laws that you read about, and they're laws that deserve death, or that the penalty, the limit on it is death. You can't get a much higher or greater limit than that. Okay, and these are the things. Murder, meaning premeditated murder, not accidental murder. Okay, physically attacking or cursing your father or mother, because remember, they represent God in your life. Okay? Kidnapping, sorcery, sacrificing to other gods and idols, bestiality, and oppressing widows and orphans, as we already read about. Now, Yehovah is showing that all of these things deserve death. That doesn't mean that death is always going to be what happens, but it does mean they're deserving of death. Okay? There are no examples that I know of in Jewish history or in the history of Israel where children were stoned to death because they were disobedient or rebellious. Okay? There is, however, a story of a dad that died, as did his children, because they were disobedient and rebellious, and he didn't discipline them. Do you remember who that is? Yeah, yes, in the book of Samuel, Eli. Okay? All right, and then we read about the appointed times. It's right there in the book of the covenant, where he says this: 3 times a year you are to observe a festival for me. And then he lists the main heading under which all of these festivals fall. So you have unleavened bread, or matzah. That's when. What's coming right up. Okay? Passover is in that, as is first fruits. So you have unleavened bread, okay? That's when you left Egypt, okay? Then you have Shavuot, which is the festival of the harvest, okay? And then at the end of the year, you have Sukkot, which is the festival of ingathering, okay? And so that appears more than once in Torah, these commandments. And later on in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, they're going to be elaborated on. Okay? I thought it's interesting that the word keep, which is the word shamar, which, by the way, is what Adam was supposed to do with the garden, shamar it, means keep, watch, preserve, or guard. But the word tishmor, which is all that is a form of shamar. Can you hear it? Shamar, tishmor. Okay? Same word, all right? It means scrupulously observing something. It's a military term describing the care with which a soldier guards territory. Okay? Now, we know from reading the Bible and reading the New Testament that both Yeshua and all of his followers kept Yishmor the appointed times. And I believe taught others to do that as well. Okay, now, last, we have this ceremony that happens, okay, where Moses takes this book of the covenant and reads it out loud so that the people can hear it, and they all respond. Everything that Adonai has spoken, we will do and obey. Okay? And Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant which Adonai has made with you in accordance with all these words." All right? Now, everything that Adonai has, I believe this is the verse where this is the right word order, that Adonai has spoken, we will do and obey. We will do and obey in Hebrew means we will do and we will hear. Okay? Shema. Why isn't it the other way around? We will hear and then we will do. They say we will do and then we will hear. And the idea is when you act on what you know of God's word, your ears will be open more. The more that you are in obedience to Him, the more your ears are going to be open to hear His voice, which is beautiful. But there's a lot more about this, okay? First of all, this renewal ceremony points to what Yeshua will do when he's getting ready to die, and he does what everybody else thinks is the institution of the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, okay? Otherwise known as the cups of Passover, which Yeshua was about to be, right? And he spoke these words. He took a cup of wine, made the barakah, gave it to them, saying, "All of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which ratifies the new or renewed covenant. My blood shed on behalf of many, so that they may have their sins forgiven." And I believe this is where Mark is going to bring up something that he was talking to me about just before we got into this, and I was like, wow, you guys all got to hear this. So I'm going to hand you the mic, okay? Are you in the booth? Hello, up there? I'm going to get the other mic, the other handheld wireless, the blue one. Is that Jacob? Yep. Hi, Jacob.
Test.
There you go. All right. Okay. So, what do you got?
All right, it's, I was talking with a rabbi that I studied under for a number of years. And
Okay, wait. Can you give him a little bit more volume?
a little more horsepower? Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I was talking with a rabbi that I studied under back in North Carolina. He does not come from the Christian side. He actually comes from the Orthodox Jewish side, but he does believe in Yeshua. He is Messianic, if you want to use that term. So I was asking him a question. One of the passages that really intrigued me in Exodus 24 was when they went up on the mountain, and Moses went up with the 70 elders, and it says they gazed at God, and it looked like sapphire in his feet and all this. And he explained to me what that was, but he says, did you see the part about the covenant? Okay, in Exodus 24. So go ahead and read that last bit there from Exodus 24.
Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 of the leaders went up. Is that where you want me to read?
No, where
I already read.
about the sprinkling, yeah, what you
Oh,
already
okay.
read.
All right. Well, we're going to go back and read that
It's on the last
section.
page there.
Gotcha. All right, then he took the book of the covenant and read it aloud so that the people could hear, and they responded, "Everything that Adonai has spoken, we will do and obey." And Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant which Adonai has made with you in accordance with all these words."
Okay, when Yeshua was ready to be crucified, and he was before Pilate, and Pilate said to them, "What shall I do with this Yeshua who is called the Christ?" And they all said to him, "Let him be crucified." Then the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult or a riot was getting ready to happen, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it." And all the people answered and said, "The blood be on us and our children." Because he was getting ready to renew the covenant, Mount Sinai, when Moses sprinkled the blood on the people and the children. Matthew 27. That's powerful.
Yeah. And they didn't even know. They didn't make that recognition. But their words, just like the words of Caiaphas, when he was like, "Well, it's better that one man die for the sins of the nation than the whole nation die." And he was speaking words that were God's words, but he didn't know it. Same thing there.
Same thing.
With his blood be on us and our children, meaning, just like Moses went whoosh with the blood, that's about what's ready to happen here and now.
And it drives the point home that Yeshua, is our living Torah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful? Okay, and the last thing that happens, I'll put one of those gingers in my mouth, they're kind of sticky, is where Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and the elders go up, and in the text is, they saw the Elohim of Israel. Okay, and under his feet was something like, the half higher stone pavement. This is just like in the book of Revelation, as clear as the sky itself. He, meaning God, did not reach out his hand against these notables of Israel. On the contrary, they saw God even as they were eating and drinking. So how does that work? If no man can see God and live, did he mean except these guys right now? Maybe. That might be exactly what it means. It might be that God was giving them a moment that was a special moment where he was like, "All right, I'm going to let you in on this." That's an option. Okay? It might be that what it means is they were looking at him like they were looking up, but they were looking through this pavement, whatever it was, that's translucent. So they were looking at him, but they weren't looking right on at him. Okay, they were looking at kind of figure-ish him. Okay, that's another option. There are other options. Seeing the God of Israel might mean they were looking at Yeshua, who was there.
There is an Aleph Tav right there, which
and
is
there's an Aleph Tav right there.
In the Hebrew.
Okay, in the Hebrew. Yeah. Which is the mark of Messiah. So I think it's something that when we read it, we're not supposed to go, wait a minute, how is that possible? I think we're supposed to go, wow. Can you imagine being those guys? Well, can you imagine being Moses? It says that Moses spoke to God how? Face to face. Well, what does that mean? Is that an idiom? Is that an idiom that means he had a really close relationship with him? Because once when Moses said, I want to see your glory, and we're going to get to that one later, God said, well, you can't look at all of it. Basically, you can look at an element of me, but you can't look right on, full on me, all of me, because no man can look on me and live. So, yes, Patty, you want to hand the mic over there? Patty has something.
I have read that rather than it being thought of as face to face, we get the picture in our minds of cheek to cheek, but it's more mouth to mouth, speaking the same language, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that works. Yeah, the language. Speaking and hearing. Mouth to ear, ear to mouth. Good. Mark?
Another point that I wanted to make addressing that, it also describes how Moses was like a friend. It would speak
Right.
face to face,
Yeah.
panim apanim, in the Hebrew. And an interesting note in the ultra-Orthodox prayer book, buried in the back of the Yom Kippur service and in the Yom Teruah service, they say that salvation, Yeshua, and they actually name him by name, but they call him Yeshua Sar Hapanim, Yeshua, the Prince of the Face. That's buried in the back of the ultra-Orthodox prayer book. A lot of them know, but they don't say. Food
Wow.
for thought. Yeah.
Wow. Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Well, then you get to go home early. A little bit.
And?
Okay, here's one. And what? Oh, I'm not there yet, but almost. Thank you. Okay, hold on. We have one question of a Zoomer. Okay, here you go.
When you were talking about Sabbath being a day of rest, it almost sounded like it could be any day and not necessarily a day to meet with God. Is there a differentiate between the Sabbath in this scripture and the Sabbath meeting with God as an appointed time?
Okay, I get it, and no. This is another angle of the one meaning, the one event of Shevat. So what we read about is another angle of it, so that your slave and your ox and blah, blah, blah can rest, okay? That you might be renewed. That's another angle of the day of Shabbat. So there's a lot of going on there, a lot of different reasons. One is because it's an example, because God rested. Okay. Another is so it's an example of His creation and His being. Another is it's like a wedding ring. It's a sign. Okay. And another here is that you might be renewed. And as we go on and we go to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you'll have even more. So it's like a diamond and you're getting different angles, glimpses of it. So Shabbat Shalom is what we want. Right. Okay. Dana, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was talking with one of my friends. He seemed to think that Shabbat was available for any day of the week, and that it could be at any time, and that was what Jesus talked about. And I got kind of, how do I want to say this? The procession of the wedding started to happen at this point in time, and we kind of looked at one another and says, we should shut up and listen to the word.
So you were at a wedding.
Yeah, it was at Carlos.
Oh, yeah.
Carlos's wedding.
So why were you there at that moment, on that day? Couldn't you have just been there any day at that wedding?
It wouldn't have worked.
Ah, bingo. Okay. Same thing with Shevat, right? It's not any day. It is the day that has, in Hebrew, has the article ha in front of it, meaning it's the Shabbat. So remember that day. Now, I will grant that there is a movement that goes from paganism all the way to Torah, and in that movement, this is the way it was in my life, in that movement, I had the realization I need to rest one day a week, because I hadn't been. I've been working 7 days a week, 7 days a week, 7 days a week. I need to rest. So I picked a day, and I began to rest on that day. Did it help? Yes, it helped. So it was a movement in the right direction. And then my words were, well, I'm practicing the principle of Shabbat. Okay? Then one day I was reading the Bible, and I went, oh, it doesn't mean that. It literally means this one day. Okay, and it goes all the way back to Genesis. So then we begin doing it on that one day. Now, I will let you know that sometimes on that one day I end up working. Okay, the priests worked on Shabbat. So sometimes that happens. So when I do, and I get another day, like usually the next day, Sunday, and I rest, there's a little bit of a feeling of this is like the replacement of Shabbat this week, but it's not as nice as it is on the real Shabbat. Because on that real Shabbat, there's really something going on there, because God will meet you there. You know, unlike he will meet you on Monday. That doesn't mean he doesn't meet you, and Christians get, all worried and bent around the axle about that, because they're like, well, God's just as available on any day as he is. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe read the Bible. Find out, yeah, he's available on any day. But there are certain days and certain moments where he's more available than others. That doesn't mean he's not available whenever, but, isn't it in the Bible? Seek me when I may be found. Okay, so it's there over and over again, but yeah.
His one comment to me was that Jesus was the Lord of the Sabbath, and he wanted to impress upon me that since he was the Lord of the Sabbath, that it could be any day. And the problem that I'm having with that, and what I'm realizing right now is that all the things we've talked about that happen on the Sabbath for us, and all the little extra niceties that just happen to be we're more blessed by them. And then you say that word again, or that phrase, Jesus is, or Yeshua is Lord of the Sabbath. It kind of makes it more important. Kind of makes it, he really is Lord of the Sabbath. It's not just not just another day.
Right, that's right. It's good, really good. I was thinking that it's the the spirit that I just going to go ahead and there's rebellion in there. Okay? And the rebellion might not be, blatant, well, I'm not Carlos, but there's a rebellion in there that's like, no, I am not going to believe that it's only that one day, because I learned from, my Christian leaders that it can be any day and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to allow that truth in. Okay? That's the spirit of, well, I don't need to go to church any day. I worship God out in nature. Well, all right. You can worship God out in nature, but you have not obeyed the Bible where it says don't give up meeting together, as others have done in the book of Hebrews. Okay? Why? Because we need to be together. How else are we going to learn how to love people that we don't like? Right? Isn't that a little bit about what the Messianic community is all about? How are you going to learn to love people if you're not around them? So, anyway, thank you all very much, and good night. And Wednesday, shalom, and go home and read your Bibles. See you Friday night.